Hello and welcome to this video. This is round 2 coverage of Tata Steel 2016. And I'm going to be honest with you, that wasn't the most exciting round ever. Yeah, this is not maybe a clever way to start such a video. People will maybe switch it off and well, I don't know, turn to some other YouTube content now as I'm being honest there. But I always felt that it's better to be honest about things and not talk some nonsense. That wasn't very exciting today, what happened. Anyway, I'm going through the games. There were some interesting moments. Yeah, it's not like that, but there wasn't any game in there that will be probably talked about for a couple of years or anything like that. So let's get going. We had 7 games, and we have this. I'm starting with the game with the shortest names. Yeah, Hou Yifan with white against Wesley So. Yeah, last year we had the pairing with opposite colors, and that meant So versus Ho or something like that. So Ho, whatever. Yeah, let's see what happened here. We had an e4 e5 opening. So Hou Yifan, the best female player currently, she's going back to her normal 1e4, and we got the Berlin. That's not very exciting start to the game. Anyway, we got d3, bishop c5, c3, castles. So we have what we quite often nowadays call the declined Berlin, not the endgame, the famous Berlin 1 endgame, but white going with d3 and c3. It is usually believed that black has very good equalizing chances here, but at least more pieces stay on the board. That knight e7 maneuver is something that was established in recent years as quite a reliable way for black to play. The idea is that after d4, black can take, but he very often will go back. That didn't happen in the game. Something similar happened, but yeah, this is a very good way for black to play. The knight wants to, that was a wrong arrow, wants to regroup to g6, and a capture on e5 is not such a big deal. e4 is also hanging. So white went rook e1, a6, bishop a7, all very normal. Black setup easily could have been from an Italian game, and in general the d3 Rui or d3 against Berlin very much resembles an Italian game. So rook e8 and c5, an interesting move. Black uses his c-pawn to fight for the center, and white closed the center now. b5, b3, bishop d7, all very normal and standard looking moves. There was one moment that I found interesting. All those moves look very standard, and I think are pretty easy to understand. Knight h2, white wants to play knight h2 g4 possibly, and now black's move is quite ambitious. So played c4, takes, bishop a5. Interesting idea to open up the queen side and maybe complicate matters a little bit. What black establishes, white has to cover c3, is that pawn on c4 now, and with the knight on f4 there are chances that this knight comes to d3. In fact, this is what happened in the game, and it looked like black has a temporary, at least initiative. The knight came to d3 and black doubled on the b file. That looks very active. Still, it is not quite clear how black is supposed to increase his initiative or somehow get something tangible out of it. Yeah, the way it went, white got ideas like knight takes c4 in, not right here, but I mean the general idea. And in fact, in the actual game, we had, after some more maneuvers, this situation. d6 is hanging, and here all of a sudden,
check.
White was a pawn up. Yeah, we have to look at this a little bit. If black takes, then bishop takes is very good, as this is hanging. So
check.
Wesley So played knight e1 check and got his piece back. But white is a pawn up, and there is no clear way for black to get it back. Yeah, here bishop a4. It's not working at all because of the d6 pawn hanging. Now he had to go back, and now white is a pawn up. However, it turns out that black has a very solid blockade there on c5. It doesn't seem to be that white can do much. It is nice with the pawn, but how exactly are you going to ever get in c4, c5? In fact, black sometimes is even able to get queen straighted to just put it on c5. After the capture, black has a very basic fortress with king being on d6, and then black just shuffles. Yeah, it's quite funny. Still nowadays engines don't get it. Yeah, Stockfish gives white a winning advantage while absolutely nothing is going on. White avoided the trade on c5, and here they agreed to draw. There's simply nothing going on. The computer still thinks white is winning easily, even though it is pretty obvious that nothing happens. Here, black can even just put the king here, and on this, you just stay. You can do absolutely nothing, as there is a barrier here that white can never break. And you have even various ways to get the draw. I mean, this would even be a draw without the h pawn, for example. Okay, not a very exciting game. Yeah, Hou Yifan had an extra pawn for quite a while in this game, but still it didn't feel like there was something bad possible to happen to the black player. Okay, let's look at the next game, and what kind of order am I going with? Yeah, maybe I'll go by, length of the white player's name. So Hou Yifan is the first game, second game is Giri Ding Liren. That's 4 letters. For both players, actually. Yeah, so we have the 2 short name games, starting with that. Giri versus Ding. Okay, what do we get? 1 c4. Yeah, that's getting really popular. Those c4, knight f3, g3 plank openings, mostly because people don't know what to do in many e4, e5 lines, like the Berlin or the Marshall. Yeah, we get a Slav here by transposition, and surprisingly, Ding opts for this line. It doesn't have the best reputation, that kind of semi-Slav where white has not played the knight yet. I'm not saying it's believed to be bad, but usually the consensus is that white should be a little bit better here, but mostly because of the possibility to play knight e5, where white gets a nice knight on e5 that cannot easily be expelled. This is the difference between having the knight on c3 and on d2, with the diagonals still open here. You can post up that knight. This was not played by Giri, however. He played queen to e2. I saw in my preparation for this video that this is also a popular move, and of course it's playable, solid, everything. Still, I would prefer knight e5. It's just a clearer way of approaching the position. That's just my personal preference. Yeah, Ding went to go c5. It, I think, makes lots of sense. You get into that hanging pawn formation quickly, and Giri quickly transposed into that. He now played bishop a6. That is a standard way, let's say, to proceed against the hanging pawns. Trade of that bishop. The idea is that after the trade, the light squares are somewhat tender, like b5, c6, b7, and also sometimes the pawn. However, what should not be underestimated here is that white has an absolutely misplaced knight for that kind of structure. The knight absolutely wants to be on c3 in this structure. It's just the opposite as what I described earlier when that bishop was supporting a knight on e5. What lacks here for white is any pressure on d5 and the possibility to maybe jump with a knight to b5. The knight on d2 is entirely misplaced, and this is the reason why black seems to be quite okay here. Queen to e7, got rook centralized, queen to e6, and knight e4. Yeah, you see knight f1. Yeah, the reason for that move is barely, or is mostly, that the knight on d2 doesn't do anything, and you want to kind of, yeah, regroup your position and kind of maybe make this more useful on g3. It's difficult to get it to some decent square. While it's challenging the e4 knight, it gets supported, and now a trade here. Rook c2, rook c8, and rooks were doubled. Yeah, white cannot take, as this is getting kind of embarrassing. Yeah?
Check.
Rook c1 is normal. h5, interesting move. Gaining some space on the king side. Why not? Yeah, it also creates some flight square for the king. Queen e2, h4. Why not? Get some space. Takes on c5. Interesting moment now. I think that some players here would be reluctant to play what Ding played now. Many would maybe opt for the b-pawn capture and yeah, play this position. This is not a bad position for black. I mean, you don't find anything terrible that can happen to black. But as I think in comparison that this still holds a little bit more dangers than what he did. He just took with the rook, getting into an IQP position. I think the isolated queen pawn is often avoided by amateur players because they kind of pretty, yeah, the static weakness of their pawn is often very much overestimated. And quite often the pawn is no problem at all. Here, this is clearly the case. There is absolutely no pressure on the d5 pawn, and black has very active pieces, as we see here with the rooks. The rooks, in fact, here got traded, and this is usually a signal, if you can trade off all of the rooks, that the side with the isolated pawn doesn't have many problems. Yeah, it's a good rule of thumb. If you play against the IQP, try to keep rooks, heavy pieces, on the board. And if you play with the IQP, you should seek for piece activity first and foremost, but also you don't mind to trade rooks that much. Yeah, it's good to have minor pieces on, but rooks you should trade. So in this position, nothing happens. Black is active and nothing can endanger him much here. We had a couple of more moves, and there was just this here, and takes on e3, and here they already agreed to a draw. The consequence of this is probably, sorry, something like that is probably going to happen, where queen takes b3 now. It's some kind of, come on, some kind of perpetual or yeah, repetition. So very correct game between Giri and Ding Liren. Okay, so if we go by length of name of the white player, the game Adams-Navara is next. Let me pick that one. Adams-Navara. Yeah, here we go. So got a Karjakin. Yeah, Navara plays a couple of openings. You cannot really predict what he's doing. He's playing, yeah, almost everything. Yeah. So Karjakin here. And Adams goes for e5. Also, Adams has played a fair share of lines against the Karjakin. He played the Panov attack, the advanced, yeah, the classical with knight d2, knight c3. This time it's the advanced variation, and it's the advanced with h4. Not the main line, but still something that is seen regularly. Black played h5. Nowadays the main move for a number of years. Also h6 was a move that was played, but ultimately I think black players decided that it's better to stop g4 for good. Yeah, Adams now played the move bishop d3. This is not the most common continuation. In fact, it is believed to be relatively meek compared to what is normally done is the move c4 to attack that center, develop actively. The bishop is often not traded at all. So quite surprising that bishop d3 was played. Navara took, played e6. So we have some kind of French structure now, but with light squared bishops traded, which can only be in black's interest. The only issue for black here is that this h5 move sometimes can be a weakness, or g5 can be a weakness. So this queenside formation can be tricky in some moments. However, the way it went, bishop g5, bishop e7, knight f3, knight h6, knight c3, knight f5, it didn't look very threatening for black. Knight e2 and c5, the typical pawn lever here by Navara. They both played this rather quickly, so it seems that they were kind of familiar with proceedings. D takes c5 and knight a6. Black wants to get this pawn back. However, check. After this sequence of moves, check, which is quite forced, Adams was able to play the move b4 and keep that pawn on c5 protected. This looks somewhat dangerous, yeah? Is black really able to play this position without any problems? What about knight takes b4? In fact, this is something that Navara could have played. His move is okay, but he could have taken rook b1, a5, king d2, let's say. Yeah, if white plays c3 here, there is this check, and this is falling. Yeah, a move like a3. Oh, come on. Check. Check. And back here somewhere is also not that much of a problem. Black is a pawn up. He's got knight c4 coming with check, and rook c8, c5 might pick up that pawn. White is definitely not better here. So black could have taken, but the move that Navara played, b6, is also perfectly fine. It's in fact an idea that's rather typical for lines where white is taking on c5 and tries to keep the pawn, that black is trying to break up that whole queen side, often giving up a pawn to activate his pieces and win one pawn back. Takes, takes, it was the idea. Knight to d4. Yeah, of course, white can try to keep c2 that way, but after a takes, we see that the weakness of the a pawn is one particular idea. In some cases, black can even play like that, yeah, giving up that b pawn and play this position now. Yeah, you're a pawn down, but the a pawn is really weak and very likely will fall. This is looking quite nice. Yeah, knight d4 was played. And after the trade and the trade, we get to precisely the same structure. A pawn is weak. Rook b1, rook a2, king d2. Yeah, white cannot take here, as this is, oops, check, blundering the rook. So king d2 and knight a6. Yeah, that looks nice. Eh? b6 is hanging. But if we do a count, it's still equal material. Yeah, white only has gotten a pawn back that on b6 that he had given on a2, and black is active here. Yeah, we had a couple of more moves, but check, check. Yeah, after that got traded, we had yeah, the draw agreed here. Yeah, not very exciting, very correct a game. However, sometimes it looks uneventful if a white player plays a somewhat, let's say, tame opening, yeah, and other guy is playing precisely, not much happens. Next game, going by our order is Eljanov Wely. Yeah, where are my notes that are admittedly not very extensive? So we had a the invitation for a Grunfeld, let's say. Yeah, I think Wely is more of a Grunfeld than a King's Indian player, but Eljanov goes for the fianchetto system and the C65 line, which is arguably probably the best line that black can play against the fianchetto. It makes an awful lot of sense to blunt the G2 bishop. The only reason why not more black players play that line is that it is somewhat unexciting at times. White often trades on d5 and it gets very symmetrical. Eljanov goes for a sideline, but a sideline that has gained popularity in recent times, the move queen to a4. Looks a bit mysterious, this move. What is this doing? The main idea is that if black plays the routine bishop g7, then white is happy to take, and black then has to take with a knight due to the pin here. And while this is not the end of the world, at least white has gotten a structure with an extra center pawn, 2 against 1. And in a structure like that, the move c6 also feels pretty useless. So black is usually avoiding the move bishop g7. In the London chess classics, there was a game to par of Giri, where knight fd7 was played. Takes and knight b6. Interesting. No? Giri had a very decent position. White returned and c takes. And we got one of those structures that I mentioned with an open c file where not much is happening. Black is probably equal, close to equal. Not very exciting though. While he goes for a6. That is a move, I mean, it has been played, but it's still rather rare. The idea is that after cd5, black plays the move b5. White goes back and black takes. The funny thing is, if we put a couple of more moves on, everything, let's go here. Everything's kind of symmetrical in a way, but black has played a6, b5. In the meantime, white has played queen a4 and back. So it looks like black has won 2 tempi. But the 2 tempi were invested in moves that are definitely not in black's interest. a6 and b5 is especially weakening the c5 square and the whole queen side. So questionable gain of time there for Wely. On the other hand, you cannot really believe that this can be decisive. However, I think what is pretty good in this game is it shows how very circumspect defense can prevent anything troublesome from happening. Wely is defending this very, very accurately. And I'll give you a couple of examples. Knight e5, bishop b7, that was traded, bishop e5. This kind of sequence I think looks pretty logical. e6, knight d2. And now there are a couple of noteworthy moves. One here is to move bishop to h6. This is a pretty good move. I can easily imagine that a weaker player would go for something like knight d7. Routine move, trading. But here I think white has some hopes that something like rook c1, knight c5 will ultimately lead to a very one-sided position. The trade of the dark squared bishops was very helpful. The g7 bishop might at some point help to cover the c5 square, while the e5 bishop is not so helpful for white in the fight of that square. So not trading this makes a lot of sense. This is why bishop h6 is a very interesting idea. And black still retains the option of playing the knight to attack the bishop. e3, queen e7, b4. Important move, getting this idea. Here we go, bishop activated. Also a very important step. Pawn to b4, bishop to b5.
Check.
Got those trades. And now knight g4. Also a good move, Black with the trades got the queen away from the d1 square, and now the bishop is attacked. Well, it's not hanging, but black is asking that bishop what it will do. Yeah, Eljanov went back to f4, and after the trades, black went back. And we see that black now has equalized. Yeah, that bishop that was a potential problem piece is on b5, and black has traded a number of pieces. Here, it is not yet, or it's not a danger anymore that the knight on c5 will cause trouble. It in fact went there, but black got in a5. Yeah, here he was able to attack the d4 pawn. It was traded, and now the black queen is active enough to always harass the white king. Here they agree to a draw. So a very uneventful looking game, but I felt that Wely did a good job there of not getting into any trouble with his weakened queen side. This is the kind of chronic static weakness that often costs weaker player the game, because they are not they're not precise enough in defending, trading the wrong pieces, things like that. And this just didn't happen here to Wely. He defended that quite nicely. Okay, so what is the next game? Let me not screw that kind of... Yeah, it was Carlsen, right? Carlsen, Caruana. That's 7 letters, so we have to go with Carlsen now. So, what did the world champion play? e4, d4, c4, knight f3, b3, b4. No, none of those. It's 1g3. Yeah, he doesn't do that. He doesn't do that often, but why not? It's not a bad move. As far as I remember, I've never lost with the move. 1g3. I played it like 3 times or so in the span of more than 25 years. Okay, of course, white can do that. It's a very transpositional move. Yeah, with to the English opening, to the Reti. In fact, we got a very unconventional position quickly. Caruana went g6, bishop g2, bishop g7, and now the move e4 by Carlsen. After 5-minute thought, yeah, so they were really just playing chess now after a couple of moves. White, of course, can also go c4 or d4. So with any of his pawn moves here, he defines the game, or the way the game progresses. Caruana now e5, yeah, blocking the center, knight e2, and now an interesting move, c5. Not an easy decision, yeah, weakening the d5 square, but black gets a firm grip over d4, and with this kind of grip, you in some way ask this knight on e2 what it is doing. Yeah, it looks at very protected squares. We already know what kind of position we get. It is closed at the beginning of the game, and it's about both sides trying to open the game favorably. And we in fact get a pretty interesting position. d3, knight c6, bishop e3, d6, queen d2, knight d4. Interesting choice. He was probably afraid that c3, d4 was coming and wanted to stall that a little bit by getting the white queen to e2. But this is the idea. White wants to push either d4 and or f4, one of the two. Carlsen now went for an interesting idea. He played h4, using the h-pawn, trying to provoke some kind of concession on the king side. It's not so easy for black here to ignore the pawn. If you develop, then h5 can be quite annoying. The move h6, for example, would cause some discomfort. It's actually rather normal to react to h4 in such a structure with the fianchetto, to react with h6 or h5. Caruana goes with h6. h5 definitely also was possible. h5, g5. This is the idea, keeping it closed. However, keeping it closed, not after f4. Quite a sharp move here by the world champion, and it leads to interesting play. That I think that is somewhat better for white. So with this creative opening setup, white has gained, I think, a slight advantage. Yeah, why, by the way? Black has a couple of weaknesses. It's not clear where his king is going. H6, whole king side is weak. And white is also a little bit quicker, and it's a little better developed. It's hard, but his pieces are a little bit more active. Knight c6 and knight a3. Here white also had knight d2. That move was a very decent alternative. Bishop e5, bishop e3, check for example, can be answered by king d1. The king is pretty safe on c2. I think here white is better, mostly because of ideas of bishop h3, possibly later rook f1 to play on the f-file. Carlsen's move, however, is not bad either. I think he has a slight advantage. All very normal, and now the check here to make the king move. Queen to d7. Yeah, the move b5 looked tempting, but white pushes with e5 all of a sudden, and white is much better. So queen d7 was played, but now d4. Yeah, no fear, pushing in front of the pawn. The thing is that after takes, black cannot play the desirable move d5, as the e-file here gets opened up, and the check is losing material. So Caruana had to play this somewhat weird looking move, but it's the only move that works. If white takes with the pawn now, d takes, that king has a problem. Yeah, if you go on the c-file, rook c8 is very awful. Or if you play this, black is getting this back and is happy with this position. So this is what white needs to do. And d5. But here white definitely has some advantage. The protected passer on d5 is strong, and that bishop here feels somewhat stranded. Bishop g4. Bishop f3, takes, queen b5. The black queen wants to get some counterplay in. I think here Carlsen makes a mistake, or well, I think this is what the machine is giving, what the engines are giving. He played the move rook c1, playing in a very direct, sharp way, not even covering the b2 pawn. However, it seems that he should have played b3. Just keep that pawn and shoot for this improvement later. One key point is that if black gives a check, white can, without any issues actually, step up to d3. After queen b5, you can go back to c2, possibly to b2. And white's king is completely safe. The idea is that after, let's say, bishop f4, you just play capture. I can actually just take. What I had in my notes was this and this, but I think, oops, I'm sorry. Rook c1. It's also not bad, but white can also take the pawn. So the king is safe here. It looks a bit wacky to put it on d3, but it's perfectly safe. Yeah, Carlsen played this. He tried something else, but here Caruana gets enough counterplay. Just about. Yeah, it looks pretty awful for black, yeah, with the white queen here, rook maybe ready to come. But rook g8 is good. Yeah, the rook is ready to join the action. And after rook f1, queen d4, check. We had a couple of checks and draw agreed. Yeah, so bit of a shame that the game ended so suddenly after we had an interesting, unconventional position. And it seemed like a very good position for Carlsen if he would have played that b3 move instead of rook a c1. So probably a spoiled opportunity here for the world champion. An interesting opening choice with g3 and e4 just completely going away from theoretical battles. So next game then is Karjakin van Wely. Yeah, this is actually the game that will be shortest in my coverage. It was a bit strange, to be honest. We had a dragon, yeah, via transposition, and yeah, this is all theory. White is going for the typical attack, the Yugoslav attack against the dragon. This is a specific version of that, with the early h4, h5 and queen a5. And this seems to be all theoretically known and explored. It's something that I just have to check database for what kind of predecessors are there. I'm not an expert at all. We got a position here after bishop g5 that was on the board just last year in the US Championships in St. Louis between US, it's not a junior player anymore, but it's one of the younger promising American players, Daniel Naroditsky with white, playing Hikaru Nakamura with black. And here Nakamura played the somewhat shocking move rook takes c3. Not that the idea is entirely shocking, but he said afterwards in the interview that it probably is not very sound, that idea to give the exchange here. And it didn't feel very sound in the next couple of moves, but Naroditsky played a couple of imprecise moves, and Nakamura ultimately won the game quite quickly on move 35. Still, that cannot be great here. I mean, the kind of sacrifice is normal in the dragon, but it feels very early. Yeah, when Wely plays the move king f8, which is funny enough not even a novelty. It has been played in a German amateur game that is following our game up to move 20, funny enough. I think without the players knowing. Yeah, they also spent quite some time here. f4, knight eg8. King f8, by the way, was played to preempt this kind of thing that's happening with f5. If this happens with a king on g8, then f takes g6 is a threat. So black is stepping out of that diagonal. The position here is, of course, rather sharp, and after takes, knight takes, first of all, bishop takes, e takes f5, rook e8. We reach that position from that German amateur game between Mr. Gümkes and Mr. Andreas. It is Wiskirchen. Yeah, probably a German league game. I feel it only gives Germany 2004. Both players are rated 2076 and 2266 respectively. Mr. Wiskirchen I actually have played in tournament chess. And now we got the novelty. In that game, in the German amateur game, there was bishop f4 played. And after rook takes f5, here bishop f4. After rook takes f5, the position was entirely unclear. Even though black won in like 4 moves, as rook takes e7 was played, which is not working at all. Rook takes, bishop takes, rook f2 e5 now was played. It's okay. Queen f4, king g8, takes, and here white already resigned. A bit early, yeah, a bit early. You can still try to muddy the waters, but white is a piece down. So what happened in our game here, Karjakin and Wely? You can ask. Okay, I can tell you. Karjakin played the move knight to d5 and offered a draw. Yes, you can do that. Yeah, you can just offer a draw. In that tournament, they have no clear anti-draw rule, and to be honest, I'm pretty surprised that he offered the draw. I don't think that white is much better here, or I don't think that Karjakin is so much, I don't know, the favorite over Van Wely that he should continue, yeah, until the last pawn. But still, it's kind of unusual to have draws offered nowadays on move 20 when the position still feels like interesting. Yeah, I mean, sometimes you have some kind of opening preparation where everything gets traded and nothing happens. I mean, I have to say that, for example, today I played a game in the German league with black against a 2,500 player where I got my opening prep and we traded, yeah, and then he offered a draw on move, I think it was move 14 or 13, I'm not quite sure. And we played this draw. It was okay for the team. It was a completely unexciting position. But this still feels like some kind of game that can be played. It's a bit unusual that this happened. And Karjakin is not the kind of player who makes quick draws. So, I don't know. Maybe there's some kind of background story there. And we shouldn't be too harsh with players sometimes. I mean, everybody who has played competitive tournament chess knows that there are days where you feel like you don't want to play chess because you just yeah, couldn't sleep at all at night because you were ill or whatever. And maybe in a situation like that, if Karjakin offers a draw and when Wely can, with a draw, get a good start to that event, why not agree to it? So not going to throw any stones here or whatever. Yeah, there's this, at least in German we have that saying, we shouldn't blame people. You are in the same situation sometimes yourself. Okay, that was not very exciting nevertheless. And the final game, clearly winning by length of name, is Tomashevsky with white against Mamedyarov. Yeah, they're actually the two longest names competing. That's quite funny. I didn't even plan for that when I started the video, but it's really the two. I started with the two short names, which is 5 letters in combination or in addition, and now we've got Tomashevsky against Mamedyarov, which feels like yeah, super long words, super long names. And we got a funny opening here: d4, d5, c4. And what did Mamedyarov play now? If you follow his chess more closely, you might guess what he's playing now, even though it still comes as quite of a shock. He plays move c5. This is something that, to be honest, I didn't even know exists. I mean, I know that it exists, but not on any high level. It's called, it doesn't have a clear name, but when I looked at this game now, I actually found out that there is a book published on that called The Double Queen's Gambit by Grandmaster Betsgodov, and it seems to be a somewhat viable opening. Always thought it is bad. What I was always thinking is that after c takes d5, this is what Tomashevsky also played, that here black plays this move, knight f6, after which theory is for a long time stating that e4 is better for white. And this is true, it is really better for white. This is what I knew about this opening, all of it. But Mamedyarov just played queen takes d5. Just take that pawn. And to be perfectly honest, it doesn't seem to be so terrible. White played knight f3, logical, cover that pawn. Black took it, knight c3, the queen is attacked, and it has to move again. So it looks a little bit, yeah, sorry if I'm frank, it looks a little bit like a patzer opening. Yeah, black is moving the queen early on, like 2 times, but look at this, it is not bad at all. White is taking on d4 with the knight. Black plays knight f6, g3, very normal. Yeah, white cannot easily play the pawn. Yeah, there's a pin. The queen is doing some job there. g3 and now e5 all of a sudden. Knight goes back, queen goes back. And this is not a bad position. I mean, black has moved his queen 3 times, but white has not gained much in the meantime. Bishop g2, black gets pieces out. Yeah, we have open c and d file, and everything is kind of easy for black. I was really surprised to see how decent Mamedyarov's position was. I found games that he had played earlier in this line. For example, he played a strong Turkish grandmaster last year in that line, where that opponent, Mr. Yilmaz, played castles here in this position instead of bishop d2. Mamedyarov won that game. So interesting. I never knew that this opening was is something to be taken serious, but it seems to be. Black develops quite smoothly here. Bishop g5, rook c8, yeah, all looks very normal. Black has got all his pieces in play, but okay, I mean, I'm not saying it's better, but for such an unconventional opening, it's really a great result. Yeah, e3 now by Eljanov, and black goes knight a5, making quite some sense, putting pressure on the queen side. That gets traded on f6 and on a5. And I think around here, the next 2 or 3 moves, it's Tomashevsky. I'm sorry, for some reason I was thinking Eljanov is white, by Tomashevsky. Yeah, Tomashevsky's next couple of moves, they feel a little bit, yeah, they don't quite add up, I think. I think he didn't have a very clear concept at this point. At least it looks like that. He played the move queen to a4. It looks logical, get that queen out of the c-file, but I think queen e4 was a little more to the point. The idea of queen e4 is that white tries to play b4, this, and a4 maybe to harass that bishop. If black plays some slowish move, for example, like he did in the game, then b4 and a4 looks quite good. One idea of the queen move, by the way, is to get the queen over here and possibly play knight e4 or bishop e4, harass the black king a little bit. I think the position is roughly equal. He played this move, however, king g7, a3. Bit slow, yeah, bit slow. Now b4 doesn't make quite some sense, as much sense as the move a4 is not possible. The queen is blocking this. Instead of a3, for example, bishop f3 was also an idea. Yeah, the idea of this move is that white sometimes has knight e4, so that after queen c1, rook c1, and so on, there is king g2 at the end. A relevant line for this is, for example, rook d2, after which knight e4 is pretty good. Yeah, something like this now.
Check.
Black can go back to d5, yeah, but here after something like g4, white is somewhat better. Black's pieces are not well coordinated, look very, yeah, they don't look harmonious at all. Bishop f3 was maybe somewhat better than a3. Now rook d2, and now white has to be precise. Queen h4 is still okay for him, but he played this move. And after this, black is definitely better. Rook d8, queen d8, yeah, stepping out of the c-file. And yeah, it's a bit awkward. This is hanging, and the queen doesn't have many squares. Rook c8, bishop takes, b4, bishop b6, knight c3. And here Mamedyarov, I think, misses an opportunity. With queen d3, he could have gotten a pretty substantial advantage. In the game, he also was better, but this is, I feel like, was even better. Black is attacking that knight, and bishop d7 can be very embarrassing for the queen. A move like knight e4, for example, after bishop d7 just wins for black. No squares. White has to play something stupid like b5. Yeah, the only move, and it just loses. Queen d3, there's only this reply. It's the only move. Everything else loses straight away. But here also after bishop e6, black has a very decent position. Like takes, very little squares. Let's say h3, bishop c4. And this is troublesome, really. The idea queen f5 is looming. In some situations, white can lose really quickly. Yeah? If he plays stuff like that, he will lose. Yeah, going back, attacking the rook. Rook moves, queen f5, and white is losing this game. The queen is just awful on a4. Queen d3 was tricky, really tricky. I mean, I'm not sure if it wins straight away, but it gets very tough for white. f5 still keeps an advantage, but white can, I think, be a little bit relieved at least. Knight d5, and this is still an interesting moment. He played bishop d8 now, and this is a bit surprising, as bishop d7 was pretty forcing. The queen is hanging. It only can go to c4, and bishop e6, it wins the queen now. Yeah, it's a deadly pin. White has to give the queen. Takes. This line is totally forced. Bishop b7, queen here, and something like, yeah, bishop c6 takes, b5, yeah. And, well, I'm not sure. Maybe white just draws this, but I still felt that this gives more winning chances than the game. He must have seen that line. It's pretty simple. I mean, bishop d7 is the first move you think of. You attack the queen. It only has that square. Bishop e6 is the pin. It's completely forced. So maybe Mamedyarov saw that and felt like, okay, that's cool, but I don't win this. and he went for bishop d8, just keeping more pieces on, more pressure on. But it feels like white is okay now. Can put some more moves on the board. Bishop f1, bishop f6. Yeah, I mean, black is still calling the shots a little bit, but probably it's not enough to do anything serious. Here bishop d7 was more, a bit more testing than bishop e5, but it's yeah, it's white has probably enough to make the draw. The way it went, we had yeah, more trades. Bishop a6 now. They didn't continue after this, but white will take, and very likely we get these two traded against one another, after which is a complete draw. So that video of a pretty uneventful round still got 50 minutes. Yeah, what can I do? But you got a pretty good overview of what happened. And after looking at the games, I actually feel like they were a little bit more interesting than I first thought. And I thought, okay, oh my god, what a snooze fest. But there were some interesting little points in there. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the coverage. I'll be back tomorrow for round 3 with hopefully some decisive games. There were 7 draws. Thanks for watching, guys. Bye bye.